Hello, and I'm really happy to be chatting about parenting teenagers today. And I've got three great guests. I've got Holly here.
Hi.
Holly, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've got 4 children, and the eldest is 21, and then I've got a 19-year-old, 17-year-old, and a 12-year-old.
Respect.
A lot.
Yeah, and Kirkland.
I am Kirkland. I have a 19-year-old boy and a 16-year-old boy.
And I'm Miranda, and I have a 14-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy.
Fantastic. One thing I wanted to focus on today was this idea of sort of inner growth and what we have all learnt by being parents of teenagers and how we've changed through that process. Huge topic. So we're going to slightly break it down, and I just wanted to start with you, Kirkland, and just if you would share with us a little bit about where you feel you have grown most in this process of raising your two boys.
I mean, it's been a journey, but I think for me, the teenage years are the most exciting for me. I mean, I love teenagers. I think there's a sort of freshness and an innocence and a youthfulness and a naivete, which is very beautiful. And they know more than you think they know, but they also know, they know very little. And so there's this sort of beautiful innocence about them, which I find very touching. And one of the things I found incredibly gratifying is the friends of my boys will come over and they'll talk to me and they'll basically tell me their stories and they'll tell me about their relationships with their parents and they'll tell me all sorts of things, which I find incredibly moving. And I think, wow, and there's this sort of relationship that is really nourishing. And so just in terms of your book, Rachel, The Gift of Teenagers, for me, the gift of teenagers has been about feeling incredibly nourished by these, beautiful, slightly innocent, but really excited, curious, joyful teens. And obviously they're very moody as well. But in general, I find them incredibly curious and joyful. And especially my 16-year-old, he's incredibly positive. And he always says, Mom, why are you so worried about everything? And can't you relax and just chill? And he'll say, I'm living my best life. He's like, you should live your best life too. And I'm like, wow, this is coming out of a 16-year-old, and to me, that's a gift because it's helped me realize I don't have to control everything. And I can have faith that these young men are essentially, they're so cool and they're so much more together and mature than I ever imagined they would be by that time. And they're giving me life lessons in terms of curiosity and joy that I never imagined I would get from teenagers. And so for me, it's been a real gift, and they really help me relax more and be more curious and be more joyful. So
I love that, and I think what I'm hearing and actually mirrors my own approach, which is that it's a lot about how you look at it, the lens you choose to look at it, and if you choose to look at it in that way, there are these huge opportunities for growing and learning, rather than starting with a kind of negative mindset that it's going to be nothing but trouble and there's going to be very dark times ahead, which then I know, Miranda, from your clinical psychology point of view, we know that when you have a kind of a ready-made narrative, you only look for evidence that...
Right, exactly that. We need to know that what we believe and what we've heard is true. So
Yes.
We go around and we look for evidence that supports that, and we dismiss evidence that challenges it.
Yes.
And we're also on high alert for things that might go wrong.
Yes.
And our threat system. So we can, if we're told it's going to be a very dark time, it's almost like we're going into that expecting it.
Yes.
So to try to shift it on its head, to turn it on its head and look for the positives and the gifts.
Any practical ways that you would advise anybody listening? I know it's a huge area.
It's a huge
area. Or anything you've done. Obviously, it's a sort of philosophical shift, which in itself is something people can adopt. But are there any sort of practical things that you can do to look in this more...
At least be more balanced, I think. It's trying to... I love that phrase, on the one hand this and on the other that.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, it's really difficult and it's scary and things might go wrong. But on the other hand, it's we're learning and it's a curious time and there's things to be gained. So we don't want to just switch it and go from negative to positive, but at least try and take that balanced
I like
approach.
that. On the one hand, on the other.
Yeah.
Holly, can you think of anything practical to kind of get this sort of mind shift that we're learning and growing rather than it's a very difficult, dark time. Is there anything you have found in your own sort of armory dealing with your four?
Yeah, how to stay more positive and
And sort of see this as sort of opportunity and kind of enjoy it more as opposed to being in a panic.
Yes, I suppose not listening to all the media and reading all the books that sort of say
Such a good point.
it's going to be awful, or even other parents who'll sort of say things like, "Oh, you're having a party and you've got 17-year-olds, everyone's going to get so drunk and they're probably going to bring loads of vodka and it's going to be a nightmare," and you're like, really? And then just like being more balanced and talking to your teenager about it and trusting, and therefore it's not, why is it going to be such a disaster?
Yeah.
And it usually isn't.
I love that. I love that. What else could be possible?
Yes.
So another thing I wanted to talk about is this idea of our own journey again, but this idea of we've got to let go and we can't control everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big thing for me, and because I think being quite an anxious parent when I started,
Yes.
trying to learn to be a less anxious parent, anxiety and control often go together. So again, any practical thoughts or ideas, is that been something you've experienced of like turning, well, one phrase I use is turning control into curiosity. So you mentioned that before, being curious.
And also I think trust, trusting your teenagers is so important, because I think if a teenager feels that you trust them, then they will actually be more trustworthy. That's my experience.
And there's evidence
totally
for that.
agree.
There's research that expectations affect outcomes. Yeah. I love that research.
And the other thing I would say is curiosity and listening. And I think if you ask teenagers questions, you'll be surprised by how much they answer. And if you listen and they know that you're a good listener, they will actually talk, in my experience. And the other thing is I use, and that sounds like a bad word, but they're friends, because if they're not engaging with me, I'll engage with their friends, and their friends are so eager to engage and to please and to be polite. And to me, having a group of teenagers and having a conversation in a sort of adult way where you're listening and you're curious about them and they just blossom. Mm-hmm. And I think so, curiosity, listening, and trust.
And asking. I loved what you said about that. It's like, we're so quick to tell. Don't do this, do that, do it this way, that's wrong, that's right. So easy to kind of get caught up in that type of controlling parenting.
Yes.
But to really try and catch yourself when you notice that you're being a bit too telling, and get back to asking.
100%.
I think that's the shift from when they've been younger, and you are always telling them, you've got to go and get your shoes, or you've got to do this, and you've got to do that, and somehow there has to be a shift. And they've got to have control of their lives, and you've got to step back, which is hard. So even for people who aren't very controlling, I think, because mothers naturally want to sort of look after, protect, which is a sort of form of control.
I'm so interested in that, because I worked with a psychotherapist who talked about switching from a relationship based on need to one on love. So they don't need you in the same way. Exactly. You don't need to drop them, pick them up, sort their shoes, but you're trying to navigate this relationship away from need and, I suppose, a degree of control to kind of love and a relationship as a kind of burgeoning adult. Mm-hmm. I think we're doing really well. It sounds like we're all letting go in a very graceful, balletic almost way. There's another thing I was interested in, again, this sort of inward journey about what we've had to set aside, what expectations or thoughts we had ahead, things we've had to unlearn. I think we've touched on it in a way about this very negative narrative, and maybe we've all discovered it sounds like actually there's a kind of another way. And maybe our experience is quite common. Your point, Holly, that a lot of what you read is so negative. But I just wondered, is there anything any of you have felt that you've had to sort of unlearn or put aside? I don't know, anything that jumps to mind?
The two things that jump to mind for me is this try not to fix it. The Bob the Builder, and really learning to hold back and not feel like you have to resolve it or solve it for them straight off. And the other is about reducing expectations. And for me, the biggest learning that's happening at the moment is not just about having more realistic boundaries for my children, and not expecting too much of them or putting too much pressure, but actually not putting too much expectation on me, and not trying to get it right all the time.
Nice.
Just being a little bit more flexible in the demand of myself as a mother.
Yeah, the sort of the whole good enough
That thing.
Winnicott, Donald Winnicott. You probably all know about him.
And it's hard. It's
Yes.
really hard. It's really hard to let go of that.
I like that. So unlearning, feeling really pressurized. Again, coming back to how we've all managed to sort of more or less stay sane through this process, how do we look after ourselves as parents while there are a lot of demands? I mean, one thing, I have a big problem around sleep. I've got much better, but just waking up and the doorbell clicking and they didn't come home when they said they would, and it's 3 in the morning and you just get really tired. And how does one look after oneself? I don't know, again, if anybody's got any, what you've done that have sort of allowed you to stay reasonably well. I mean,
Life 360 app, anyway.
Yeah. Yes, that is so. Kirkland has the most amazing app full of really great advice about self-care and looking after yourself.
Well, so this one is actually the app that locates them. It's a locator app. And that really helps me, because when I wake up at 3 in the morning, actually I never have fallen asleep, I can see where they are. And depending on where they are, you develop a sixth sense as a mother to sort of figure out, okay, where are they according to this app? And then I text them. And then one of our rules is you have to text me back. And, I don't care where you are, how drunk you are, but you have to text me back if I text you at 3 in the morning. And they do.
So just tell us again the name of the app.
So it's called Life 360. And in fact, on your iPhone, you have an app, a locator app anyway. But mine is, I have an Android. And so I've downloaded this app and it tells me exactly where my boys are. Where it tells me how fast they're going. So my eldest is on a gap year in Vietnam, and he was in a taxi ride for 8 hours in the middle of the night, and I was terrified. And it showed me exactly how many miles per hour he was going, what routes he was going on. And so, I was up most of the night tracking this. So in terms of self-care, I mean, to me, just knowing that they're okay, and I would text him and he would say, yeah, I'm fine, everything's fine. It is a little neurotic, but it's one of the benefits of digital devices is that you can actually track them. Whereas when I was young, my parents would wait up. They would have no idea where I was. There were no mobile phones, and it was a lot more stressful. And also, I think having that communication and agreeing that they will check in and immediately respond is important as well.
Yeah. I think, that is an absolute key to sort of self-care, is that not so many rules, but rules you've agreed together. Yeah. And you can't just have free reign.
Yeah.
And the one about they text you back, or if you do have an agreed time, they come home the agreed time, is the key. Well, one of the keys to sanity. Sounds like you were gonna jump in.
No. I was just going to agree with all that. Like, you making rules together, not coming along and saying, right, you've got to do this, and you have to be back then. And it's just like, well, what do you think is reasonable? And they might come back with 3 a.m. and you meet them in the middle.
Yes.
And then you give them a chance. You're like, okay, if you stick with that, great. But if you break it, then it's going to go down, or you're not going to be allowed to do the next thing. But they like it if you make rules with, well, not rules, but sort of agree things together.
Boundaries.
Yeah.
Someone said it's a bit like a bird. You have to have both sides. You can't just completely let go. Yeah. But knowing that the rules will be stuck. The few that really matter to you. If you have too many, they're not going to follow them probably.
Then I think, I was talking to a Zen nun who has a son who's an extreme skier, and my son is an extreme skier. And she said, what you have to do is every morning I sit on my pillow and I meditate, and I get ready and I surrender to whatever is going to happen. And I think there's an element of that, of letting go also, that some things you just can't control, and you have to have to accept that there's an element of grounding within yourself.
Yes.
And the knowledge that you can't control everything, and that there is an element of surrender. Otherwise you go insane. I mean, I have an extreme skier as a son, and it's very difficult.
Who can do the serenity prayer?
Yep.
Yeah. How does it go?
Lord, grant me the courage to accept the things that I cannot change, the wisdom no, what is it? The grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Okay, I think that isn't that wonderful?
It's very beautiful.
And it actually leads me to what I wanted to talk about was this sort of mental load of parenting, and that is such a profoundly philosophical kind of guide, really, isn't it? To not, letting go of what you can't control.
Yeah.
One of the things I do in terms of the sort of mental load and not being overwhelmed is I honor my desire. So I would like them to be tucked up in their beds with their pillows at 10 o'clock. And I would like them never to take drugs. And I would like them not to go down rabbit holes on social media. I would love all these things. And I can't shut down those feelings. I do quite a lot of meditation and kind of honoring those feelings. But I also accept I can't affect the outcomes.
Yes.
And I can't control the outcomes.
Yeah.
The real key, the real difference, though, is not to try to shut down the desire that you would like that. Because you can't actually shut down your feelings.
No.
Okay, well, that is amazing. A quick nip around a very big topic, but what we feel we have learnt and how we've grown through a bit of parenting with teenagers. Thank you all so much.